Definitely, there is no doubt that the country is going through turbulent times, just like the global economy, as some economic indicators are moving in the right direction while others also moving in the wrong. For the second quarter of this year, Nigeria's GDP growth was recorded at 5.01%, a positive development reflecting impressive outturns in the services and agriculture sector. However, inflation, though receding, is still at unacceptably high double levels as interest rate margins are also narrowing, though still unacceptably wide. Despite these macroeconomic challenges, the Nigerian economy is expected to have an improved economic performance in the third and then fourth quarter of this year, going by the massive policy support from both the monetary and fiscal authorities, as well as the continued vaccination deployment in advanced economies as well as Nigeria. Joining me now to discuss this and much more from our Abuja studio to deliberate more on this and other issues, I have Development Finance Analyst and a Professor of Accounting, Professor Ofili Ugwudioha. Good to have you on the show today.
Yeah, how are you? Thank you very much for having me.
Now, looking at how progressive, we've seen some expansionary levels of growth in the Nigerian economy from the first report of our GDP to the second quarter GDP report, away from the recession which recorded last year. How do you see us moving into the third quarter territory and then having the reports and forecasts for the fourth quarter, which are already on here in Nigeria?
Yeah. Like I said, thank you for having me here. You know, GDP in itself is made up of the economic activities generated within the country for that very accounting period or fiscal period in question. In Nigeria, for instance, we have around 200 million people, and we have a very large land mass. And of course, the generation of GDP depends on the government actions. Government makes a budget every year, and that budget is aimed at stimulating the GDP and stimulating the economic growth. Sometimes government budget, particularly in Nigeria here, does not reflect in the people's economic activities. And that is a very pitiable condition, where I believe we shall be there if we put the round peg in round hole to be able to get the correct result. For the projection, or for the third quarter, which we assume, because it's actually a forecast, because the third quarter, official third quarter report has not been released by NBS. So if 5.1% becomes what we have for the third quarter, or even the second quarter, I believe that it is a good one. And considering what happened in every part of the world, that all nations have been brought to their knees because of COVID pandemic. So that achievement or projection is a very good one. And going forward for the fourth quarter, I actually do not expect anything more than what we have seen. Because what will make you project positively or negatively is actually the data you have for the past, the current data of what is available now, and then you will be able to forecast for future. If you look at the data of what we have currently, particularly the economic indices, if you take each sector on its own, if you look at agriculture, you know that agriculture is not growing. Agriculture has gone down, almost 100% down from what it was some years back. That is measured by the prices of foodstuff that we are buying in the market. People are no longer going to the farm, and because they have been chased away by either Boko Haram or herdsmen that is parading across the whole nation. Is no longer in one particular area. And agriculture being the main driver of Nigerian economy, if we cannot grow there, I don't expect further growth in the fourth quarter. Assuming that the 5%, assumed 5% which we are talking today is a reality, well, we can say thank you for reaching that level.
Prof, if I may button here
there are
now,
many things to be done to make sure.
If I may button here right now, let's look at building resilience through reforms at this point in time. You've made mention of monetary and fiscal authorities coming together. You made mention of some ways we could build some robust level of reforms to ensure that we have some steady growth. But at the end of the day, one of the biggest challenges we have to face is our fiscal deficit and how much of a chunk this takes from the GDP. Our debt to GDP ratio, our borrowing ratio, our state of infrastructure, and a whole lot more. How do we build resilience? How does the Nigerian economy become much more resilient through reforms in all of these key areas of the economy, from the non-oil to the oil sector, infrastructure, and a whole lot more?
Yeah, I come again. I still take it back from the economic activities. You know that oil contributes only 7.5% of GDP. While non-oil, which includes all these things we have mentioned, contribute to 92 point something %. And I say that the economic reality of Nigeria does not reflect the projection or the projection of the GDP. Because most firms, most companies that were operating in Nigeria have relocated to different countries, our neighboring countries, because of enabling environment that are provided in that place. This enabling environment is supposed to be provided from our budget, because that is why government have a lot of regulatory agencies that form the system. Government is a system-driven process, and that system-driven process is supposed to enhance people to work, people to operate, people to do their businesses, do manufacturing, do trading, do agriculture, and all sorts of these things. That is what gives a GDP a boost. Our own GDP is just to compute what a farmer, how many farmers have gone to farm, how many artisans have gone to their trade points, and this and that. But the value that such adds to the economy is almost minimal, because if we have this other side that the non-oil GDP is giving us 90-something %, that could have been also reflective in our revenue generation. Because if you look at the generation of revenue from Nigerian budget, you see that most of them come from the oil. It's supposed to have come from the business activities if the businesses are thriving. And those business activities will help to generate taxes. Because that is why when you are now talking to government, or when government is making a promise, they will tell you that they are not going to misuse the taxpayers' money, which means our economy is supposed to be driven by taxes. The government revenue is supposed to be driven by taxes. But that is not how it is here. So if you check the contribution of non-oil GDP to the entire gross domestic product, which is the entire economic activities going on in the country, You see that oil is just ordinary 7%. But that 7% is what is giving you the major revenue, which means all other people are just going around to find what to eat and nothing more. So that's the truth.
Okay, Prof.
So we should be able as a government, to look at these policies, how it will be able to enable ordinary men to generate their businesses, how it will be able to bring back the production that was known in Nigeria, that some of us, when we were growing up, we didn't want to work for public sector because we wanted to work for companies. We wanted to work for private sector where growth is very easy, and you get yourself up as easy as possible if you are very skillful.
Okay. Now,
so, but those things are no longer in Nigeria. So how do we grow? And how do we realize anything? That's why some of us who are the analysts doubt the possibility of all these projections. How do you get it?
Okay.
From where?
Okay, Prof. Now, the federal government still insists that we have a revenue generation problem. Just like other developing nations, one of the biggest challenges is having to generate or gain as much from the economy just to ensure that we are able to stand on our own feet and reduce our borrowing rate. But at the end of the day, let's now look at the how. Incentives to ensure that we have much more strategic means or blueprint to ensure that we have an economy or value chain that is strong enough to generate revenue, reduce our borrowing, and ensure that the masses are able to make money on an average. Then they can be taxed properly. How do you see us building a much more resilient economy by having strong revenue generation strategies?
Yes. Thank you very much. You know, like I said, this is a build-up from what I said earlier, that revenue is generated mostly from taxes. And the people you are seeing in Nigeria are mostly artisans and small-scale traders that are just going there to feed themselves, to find something to pay the children's school fees. The companies are not there. And even the few that are there are finding it difficult to pay their workers' salaries and be able to survive. So you tax only on profit. If they don't make profit, how do you tax? So the basic thing now is provide those enabling environment. Number one of it is security. Another one is improve power. Because if there's no power, go to any part of the world, make any agreement you want to make with them or international collaboration, they will never come. If you look at our foreign direct investment, it has gone down very drastically. Not even because of COVID. COVID affected the whole world, but the world economy is back now. But where is ours? So that's the issue. Then another way to reform oneself is to check what do you actually have. If you are earning 20 million naira as a man, why should you go and spend 30 million naira? Why should you spend 30 million naira when you know that your earning is 20 million? That is what contributed our debt. And the debt is so high now that is consuming more than 70–80% of our earned revenue. A country can never survive like this. If I were in government, I will advise this government, trim down your expenses down to what we can earn. If you look at the budget for this year, the government is supposed to generate from all sources around 8 trillion, which ordinarily would have been sufficient for the government if there are no wastages. If some people's wages or consumption in a month are not 29 million or 30 million a month per person, for those people, why an ordinary man is struggling to get his 30,000 naira a month? So this, first of all, trim yourself the way you will be able to control yourself. There's nobody who has a justifiable argument to tell me that that 8 trillion or even 9 trillion cannot drive Nigerian process for a year? It is not possible. It's not true. I'm a finance person. I specialize in finance, development finance. So it's not true. We are deceiving ourselves. So I advise government to retrieve certain expenses that they have been making, certain individuals that are spending more than required. You become a senator, then your salary will now pay everybody in your constituency, your salary for 1 month. You become a minister, all you have will be able to pay everybody in your constituency. And all those people remain hungry.
One of the ways
impoverishing the people by reaching a section of people which are less than 3% of the population. Then the remaining 97% are poor. And this is what brought the security issue in Nigeria. Because a hungry man is an angry man. And anger takes somebody to do something bad. Most of the people you see now carrying gun in the street and meeting people in their houses to break their houses and they kill or take whatever they want, they are not born criminals. They were impoverished by the system. And that impoverished them, pushed them to go and do the bad things to be able to feed.
Prof, for the lack of time
these
now,
are the problems that we are now addressing the surface.
Yes, these are some of the problems we have. We definitely have to look at the rising cost of governance, bring down that cost and ensure that we have transparency, reduction in corruption and a whole lot more. But Prof, let's bring into perspective the 2022 appropriation bill, which has been scrutinized and expected to be looked at and presented alongside the finance bill 2022. Let's look at the GDP forecast for next year, 4.2% and then 13% inflation rate. There are conversations as to whether or not this is conservative. How do you see things panning out come next year if we successfully sustain all of this growth trajectory we've seen from the first to second quarter and it maintains to the fourth quarter of this year? How do you see things starting to come next year for 2022?
Yeah, first of all, let me start with the inflation rate. The inflation rate is almost impossible if we are using the correct indices. If we are using the correct indices to compute our inflation, it is almost impossible to achieve 13%. Yes, if you are now talking about the aggregate inflation, fine. But Nigerians are talking about the food inflation, the consumption inflation, that is today 20.7. So how can you bring it down? Yes, it is true that they have said from 17% of aggregate or this and that inflation that it has come down to 16. Yeah, but that takes a year to come down to 16. So it takes you a year to achieve this, and you are now thinking that by next year you will come down to 13. But it takes you almost 1 year to achieve 1% drop. So that is that projection needs amendment if it's not too late. But I know we cannot achieve it. And one problem we have with our government is that if somebody makes a projection for you and the projection does not work, it's off. Hello? Hello?
Off. I can hear you.
It's off.
Well, we apologize for the breaking connection there. We've been speaking with Professor Ofili Ugwudioha. We've been looking at the state of the economy, looking at projections for the third quarter of this year, expecting the National Bureau of Statistics to release that report shortly. And then we're already in the fourth quarter of the year discussing forecasts of what will play out ahead of the year 2022. We've been speaking with Professor Ofili Ugwudioha.